0400 hours, international waters, 30 miles off the coast of the contested island chain. The ocean is a sheet of black glass undisturbed by wind. Thick mist clings to the rusted hulls of the Allied merchant fleet as they drift south. On the lead cargo ship, the deck lights hum with a dull yellow glow. Crew members move sluggishly through the pre-dawn darkness, checking heavy containers lashed to the steel deck. The only sound is the rhythmic churning of the diesel engines and the gentle slap of water against the bow. A coffee cup sits steaming on the bridge console, vibrating slightly with the ship's engine. The radar screen chirps. It is a single, sharp sound. The first officer leans in. The green sweep line pulses. One blip splits into 5, then 10, then 20. The captain raises his binoculars. On the horizon, jagged silhouettes detach themselves from the darkness. They run silent, they offer no radio warning, they rotate their main guns. A flash of white light blinds the horizon. The air screams. A heavy shell slams into the bow of the cargo ship. Steel shears like paper. The explosion rips the forward deck apart, hurling a massive shipping container into the sky. It twists in the air and crashes down onto the bridge wing. Metal screeches against metal. The shockwave shatters the bridge windows instantly. Glass sprays inward, coating the floor in jagged shards. The captain is thrown against the bulkhead. He scrambles to his feet, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. He grabs the radio handset. He screams a distress call. Static answers him. Another shell strikes the waterline. The hull groans and buckles violently. Seawater roars into the forward cargo hold, dragging crates and machinery into the swirling vortex. The ship lists heavily to port. On the deck, sailors scramble for the aft ladders. The heat from the burning bow blisters the paint on the bulkheads. Black smoke billows up, choking the air. Enemy frigates surge forward out of the mist. They cut through the waves, closing the distance rapidly. Their autocannons open fire. Tracers stitch bright lines of destruction across the water. Heavy caliber rounds tear through the thin metal of the merchant ships. Wood splinters, flesh tears. A crewman running for the lifeboat collapses, his leg shattered by shrapnel. Blood sprays across the white railing. He screams, but the roar of the fire drowns him out. The hostile fleet fans out. They form a solid wall of steel, blocking the trade route. A second Allied tanker takes a direct hit to the fuel reservoir. The explosion is blinding. A massive column of black smoke and orange flame punches a hole in the low-hanging clouds. Oil spills onto the ocean surface, igniting instantly. The water turns into a burning lake. Men jump from the burning deck, hitting the water hard. They surface, gasping for air, only to find the sea around them on fire. 50 miles to the east, the alarm klaxon blares on board the lead US destroyer. The Combat Information Center bathes in emergency red light. Sailors sprint to their battle stations. The Tactical Action Officer stares at the screen, watching the signatures of the burning merchant fleet. He slams his hand on the console. He shouts coordinates into his headset. The captain steps onto the bridge. He sees the glow on the horizon. He authorizes immediate engagement to break the blockade. The destroyer heels hard to starboard. The 5-inch main gun rotates with a mechanical whine. The ship accelerates, its bow cutting a massive wake as it charges toward the inferno. The ocean is a graveyard of burning wrecks. Debris floats in the spreading oil slick. The hostile blockade line holds firm, their guns smoking in the cold night air. The water is choked with the wreckage of the Allied supply run. The attack has begun. 0530 hours, flight deck US aircraft carrier. The pre-dawn sky is a bruised purple, turning gray at the edges. Steam rises from the catapult tracks, swirling in the stiff ocean breeze. Ground crews in color-coded jerseys move with practiced urgency. They check ordnance loads, fuel lines, and hydraulic systems. The smell of jet fuel is overpowering. A dozen fighter jets sit crouched on the deck, engines whining as they spool up. The sound builds to a deafening roar that vibrates in the chest of every sailor on deck. The flight boss signals from the tower. The first jet taxiing forward locks into the shuttle. The pilot salutes. The shooter drops to one knee and points forward. The catapult fires. The fighter jet screams down the short runway. It hurls itself into the air, afterburners glowing blue-white. It banks hard left, climbing vertically into the clouds. Another follows, then another. Within minutes, the squadron is airborne, forming a tight formation as they speed toward the coast. 40 miles away, the enemy bomber wing approaches the Allied port city. They fly low, hugging the wavetops to evade long-range radar. Their bomb bay doors open. Their target is the civilian dockyards and the fuel storage depots. The U.S. flight lead spots the bogies on his radar. He arms his missiles. He dives. The air battle erupts instantly. The US fighter jets break formation, dropping from the clouds like hawks. They engage the enemy bombers before they can release their payloads. A US jet locks onto the lead enemy bomber. The pilot squeezes the trigger. A missile streaks out from under the wing. It trails a line of white smoke. It slams into the enemy bomber's starboard engine. The explosion shreds the wing. The bomber rolls violently. It spirals down, trailing fire and black smoke. It smashes into the ocean, sending a massive geyser of water into the air. The remaining enemy bombers scatter. They jettison their bombs early to gain speed. Explosions rip through the water, missing the port but churning the sea into a froth. Enemy escort fighters peel off to engage the US squadron. A dogfight ensues. It is a chaotic dance of metal and fire. A US jet pulls a high G-turn, the pilot grunting under the pressure. An enemy fighter overshoots. The US pilot lines up the shot. His cannon roars. Shells tear through the enemy fuselage. The cockpit canopy shatters. The enemy plane disintegrates in midair, raining burning debris into the sea. Another US jet takes the hit to the tail. Smoke pours from the engine. The pilot struggles with the stick. The aircraft shudders violently. He punches the eject button. The canopy blows. The rocket-propelled seat shoots him clear of the doomed plane. His chute opens, a small white flower against the gray sky. Below, the enemy bombers regroup for a second pass at the port. They ignore the fighters and drive straight for the docks. A stray bomb strikes a warehouse on the pier. The roof collapses inward. Concrete dust and debris blast outward. A crane topples over, crashing onto a docked freighter. The US flight lead dives again. He pushes his throttle to the stops. He comes in behind the last enemy bomber. He fires his last missile. It tracks true. It hits the fuselage directly. The bomber explodes in a massive fireball. The shockwave rattles the windows of the city miles away. The remaining enemy aircraft turn back. They cannot break the US air screen. They dump their fuel and flee toward the horizon. The US jets pursue them to the edge of the engagement zone, then bank back to patrol the airspace. The sky is clear, but the water below is littered with burning wreckage. The port is safe, but the battle for the sea has just begun. 800 hours, open ocean, the blockade line. The sun hangs high, casting a harsh glare across the choppy water. Whitecaps break against the gray hulls of the US Naval Task Force. The air is thick with the chemical tang of spent rocket fuel and burning oil from the earlier attacks. On the bridge of the lead US destroyer, the crew stands rigid. The silence is heavy, broken only by the hum of cooling fans and the quiet chatter of the tactical net. The captain stands by the window. He raises his binoculars. 3 miles out, the enemy fleet forms a jagged wall of steel. They are blocking the lane. Their missile tubes are open. The tactical officer shouts, "Vampire! Vampire! Inbound missiles!" The alarm screams. The captain grabs the railing. He orders all hands to brace for impact. The enemy frigates fire a salvo. 6 smoke trails streak across the sky, closing the distance at supersonic speed. They skim the waves, hunting the US ships. The US destroyer responds instantly. The vertical launch system cells on the foredeck blast open. Compressed air hisses. Flames erupt. A volley of interceptor missiles shoots upward, trailing thick columns of white smoke. They arch over the ship and dive toward the incoming threats. The sky erupts. 3 enemy missiles explode in midair, detonated by the interceptors. The blast waves shake the US destroyer. Metal fragments rain down on the ocean like hail. 1 enemy missile slips through the net. It screams toward the destroyer's port side. The close-in weapons system, CIWS, activates. The automated turret spins with a mechanical whine. It roars. A buzzsaw sound tears the air. Thousands of tungsten rounds vomit from the barrels. They create a wall of lead. The enemy missile flies into the stream. It detonates 50 yards from the hull. The explosion is deafening. A shockwave slams into the destroyer. Water sprays over the bridge windows. Shrapnel pings off the steel plating. A radar dish on the mast shears off and crashes onto the deck. The captain recovers his balance. He orders a full counterstrike. The US destroyer shudders as it unleashes its main battery. Anti-ship missiles launch from the aft tubes. They drop to sea level, hugging the water to avoid detection. They accelerate to Mach speeds. The lead enemy frigate detects the launch too late. Its defensive guns chatter wildly, missing the targets. The first US missile strikes the enemy ship amidships. The impact is catastrophic. The warhead punches through the armored belt. It detonates deep inside the engineering section. The enemy frigate lifts out of the water. The keel snaps. A fireball engulfs the superstructure. The radar mast collapses into the burning bridge. Secondary explosions rip through the hull as ammunition stores ignite. The ship breaks in two. The bow and stern fold upward like a closing book. Sailors jump from the burning rails into the churning sea. The U.S. destroyer pushes the advantage. The 5-inch deck gun swivels. It pounds the remaining enemy ships. Shells hammer the enemy decks, tearing up metal and smashing weapon mounts. The enemy formation crumbles. Their remaining ships turn hard, scattering to avoid the barrage. They lay down a smokescreen, fleeing the engagement zone. The blockade is broken. The U.S. task force steams through the gap, engines running at full power. They pass the burning wreckage of the enemy frigate. The hull hisses as it sinks beneath the waves. The path to the island is open. 1,200 hours, coastal defense sector, the primary beachhead. The tropical sun beats down on the white sand, creating waves of heat distortion. The ocean is calm, turquoise water lapping gently against the shore. Behind the dune line, U.S. Marines crouch in reinforced fighting holes. They are motionless. Sweat drips from their noses onto their rifle stocks. The air smells of wet sand and heated metal. A seagull cries overhead, the only sound in the heavy midday heat. A low rumble begins offshore. It vibrates through the ground. The Marines tighten their grip on their weapons. On the horizon, the sea churns white. Gray shapes detach from the transport ships anchored miles out. They are square, ugly, and loud. The first wave of enemy amphibious assault vehicles plows through the surf. Their tracks grind against the coral reef. They surge forward, engines roaring, cutting through the shallow water. Water sprays over their sloped armor. They hit the sand. The lead vehicle crushes a line of driftwood. It grinds to a halt 50 yards up the beach. The rear ramp drops with a heavy metallic clang. The U.S. Marine captain blows his whistle. The dune line erupts. Heavy machine guns open fire from concealed bunkers. The noise is a continuous, deafening roar. Bullets chew up the sand, creating a wall of dust. Enemy infantry pours out of the rear of the assault vehicles. They run straight into the kill zone. The first 3 men drop instantly, their chests stitched with rounds. They collapse into the wet sand, water washing over them. The others dive for cover behind the vehicle's tracks. They return fire. Green tracers snap over the Marines' heads, shredding the palm fronds behind the trench line. An enemy vehicle rotates its turret. Its cannon fires. A high-explosive shell strikes a Marine bunker. Sandbags disintegrate. The log roof collapses, dust billows out, obscuring the position. 2 Marines are thrown backward by the blast, landing hard in the dirt. A U.S. Marine anti-tank team pops up from a spider hole. The gunner shoulders a rocket launcher. He aims. He fires. The rocket streaks across the beach. It slams into the side of the lead enemy vehicle. The explosion rips the vehicle open. Metal plating flies into the air. Flames shoot out of the hatches. A crewman scrambles out of the burning turret, his uniform on fire. He rolls in the sand, screaming. The ammunition inside the vehicle cooks off, popping and banging like firecrackers. More enemy landing craft hit the beach. The ramps drop. Hundreds of enemy soldiers surge forward, stepping over the bodies of the first wave. They throw smoke grenades. Thick white smoke covers the beach, blinding the U.S. gunners. The Marine captain grabs the radio. He yells for mortar support on the defilade. Seconds later, mortar rounds whistle down. They impact the beach with dull thuds. Sand and shrapnel spray outward in lethal circles. Enemy soldiers are tossed into the air like rag dolls. The smoke mixes with the dust of the explosions, creating a gray hellscape. The enemy advance slows, but they do not stop. They crawl forward through the craters, inching toward the dune line. The gap closes to 50 yards. Hand grenades fly back and forth. The explosions are close, shaking the ground. The smell of cordite and blood is thick in the humid air. The beach is no longer white. It is scarred black and stained red. The enemy has a foothold. 1430 hours, the coastal ridge, overlooking the primary beachhead. Black smoke drifts through the palm trees, obscuring the sun. The noise of battle is a continuous grinding roar. On the ground, the U.S. Marine line is buckling. Enemy infantry swarm over the sand dunes, firing from the hip. They toss grenades into the forward foxholes. Dirt and body parts fly into the air. A Marine machine gunner jams his weapon. He frantically clears the chamber as enemy bullets kick up dirt inches from his face. The enemy is 30 yards away and closing. They scream as they charge. The radio operator in the command trench yells into the handset. He demands immediate support. A low thumping sound vibrates the air. It grows louder, shaking the leaves off the trees. 2 U.S. attack helicopters pop up from behind the ridgeline. They hover like giant predatory wasps. Their nose-mounted sensors swivel. The pilot of the lead helicopter squeezes the trigger. The 30mm chain gun under the nose roars. It sounds like canvas ripping. A stream of high explosive rounds rains down on the enemy infantry exposed on the open sand. The impact is devastating. The heavy shells hit human bodies and explode. Enemy soldiers are torn apart. The sand around them erupts in red geysers. The charge falters instantly. The second helicopter dips its nose. Rockets streak from the pods on its stub wings. They fly straight into the cluster of enemy armored vehicles idling at the water's edge. The first rocket hits a troop carrier. The explosion blows the roof off. The vehicle jumps in the air and crashes down, burning fiercely. The second rocket strikes an ammunition truck. The blast is blinding. A shockwave flattens the nearby palm trees. Debris rains down on the beach for hundreds of yards. The enemy soldiers panic. They have no cover. They dive into craters or run back toward the water. The lead helicopter pivots. The gunner tracks the fleeing troops. The chain gun fires again. It walks a line of explosions across the beach, cutting off their retreat. Sand and water spray into the air. On the ground, the Marine captain rallies his men. He jumps up from the trench. He points forward. The Marines surge out of their holes. They fire into the retreating smoke. They reclaim the dune line, stepping over the shattered remains of the enemy assault force. The attack helicopters bank sharply, engines whining. They circle back for another run, their shadows racing across the burning beach. The enemy offensive is broken. The sand is littered with burning metal and the dead. The Marines hold the line. 1700 hours, the lowlands, 2 miles inland from the coast. The afternoon light is fading, casting long bruised shadows across the rice paddies. The air is heavy with humidity and the smell of ozone. The enemy forces hold the regional airfield. Their tanks sit hull down behind earth berms, barrels pointed at the approach road. Razor wire coils around the perimeter. A red flag snaps in the wind atop the control tower. The ground begins to tremble. It is not an earthquake. Mud puddles on the road ripple. The U.S. armored column rounds the bend. Main battle tanks lead the formation, their turbine engines whining like jet aircraft. They move fast, kicking up massive rooster tails of mud and water. The enemy tank commander spots the movement. He screams an order. The enemy tank fires. A sabot round streaks across the field. It flies supersonic. It slams into the front glacis of the lead U.S. tank. Sparks shower the hull. The depleted uranium armor holds. The round shatters on impact, leaving a glowing gouge in the metal. The U.S. tank does not slow down. The turret rotates smoothly. The stabilizer keeps the gun level as the tank bounces over rough terrain. The gunner acquires the target. Fire! The main gun erupts. The blast kicks up dust around the tank. The round crosses the distance in a heartbeat. It hits the enemy tank directly on the turret ring. The impact is absolute. The enemy turret is ripped from the hull. It flips into the air, trailing cables and smoke. The ammunition inside detonates. A column of fire shoots 200 feet straight up. The hull burns fiercely. The U.S. column fans out. They form a line abreast, charging the airfield. Infantry fighting vehicles flank the tanks, their autocannons thumping rhythmically. They spray the enemy trench lines with high explosive rounds. Enemy soldiers in the trenches fire rocket-propelled grenades. A rocket hits the track of a U.S. fighting vehicle. The track snaps with a loud crack. The vehicle spins out, sliding sideways into a ditch. The rear ramp drops instantly. U.S. infantry scramble out, taking cover in the mud. They return fire with rifles and machine guns. The U.S. tanks crush the razor wire. They roll over the perimeter fence, flattening it. They drive straight up the earth berms. They depress their guns. They fire point blanks into the enemy positions. The concrete bunkers crumble. Sandbags fly apart. Enemy resistance collapses. The survivors throw down their weapons and run toward the jungle edge. The lead U.S. tank rolls onto the runway. Its treads grind the tarmac. The commander pops the hatch. He looks out at the burning enemy armor. The airfield is retaken. 2100 hours. The interior highlands 10 miles behind enemy lines. The night is pitch black. Clouds blot out the moon and stars. The wind howls at 15,000 feet. The ramp of the C-130 transport plane opens slowly. The interior turns red as the jumpmaster signals. The roar of the engines and the rushing wind is deafening. 6 figures in black tactical gear stand at the edge. They step off. They fall into the void. They plummet for 60 seconds, terminal velocity tearing at their jumpsuits. At 2,000 feet, they pull the cords. Canopies snap open with a sharp crack. They drift silently, steering toward a clearing deep in the jungle. They land hard, rolling to absorb the impact. They bury their chutes. They move. They creep through the undergrowth, invisible. Night vision goggles turn the world into green phosphor. They reach the ridge overlooking the valley. Below, the enemy artillery battery is active. Massive howitzers fire rhythmically. The muzzle flashes light up the jungle like lightning. The ground shakes with every volley. These guns are pounding the US beachhead miles away. The team leader signals. They split up. 2 men set up a sniper hide. 4 men move down the slope, carrying satchel charges. They slip past the sentries. A guard leans against a truck, lighting a cigarette. A US operator steps out of the shadows behind him. A knife flashes. The guard drops without a sound, dragged into the bush. The team reaches the guns. They plant C4 explosives on the breaches and the ammunition stockpiles. They set the timers. 5 minutes. They retreat back up the ridge. They reach the extraction point. Fire in the hole! The valley floor erupts. The first explosion shatters the breech of the lead gun. Steel fragments fly like shrapnel. The second charge detonates the ammunition truck. The blast is colossal. A shockwave flattens the trees for 50 yards. A fireball rolls across the artillery pit. The remaining shells in the stockpile cook off in a chain reaction. The valley turns into an inferno. The enemy camp is consumed. Secondary explosions pop and bang, sending tracers spiraling into the night sky. The shelling on the beachhead stops. The silence returns to the jungle, broken only by the crackle of the fires below. The team melts back into the darkness. 0200 hours, 500 feet below the surface. Total darkness. The pressure is immense, crushing against the steel hull. Inside the US attack submarine, the air is cold and recycled. Red tactical lighting reflects off sweat-slicked faces. The crew speaks in whispers. The only sound is the low hum of the reactor and the rhythmic pulse of the sonar. On the screen, a massive green blob dominates the center. It is the enemy flagship. It moves slowly on the surface, surrounded by smaller escort destroyers. It is unaware. The weapons officer locks the solution. He nods to the captain. The captain speaks clearly. Match bearings, shoot tube 1, shoot tube 2. Compressed air blasts. The submarine shudders violently. 2 heavy torpedoes shoot from the bow tubes. Their propellers spin up instantly. They accelerate through the black water, trailing thin guidance wires. They close the gap at 50 knots. On the surface, the enemy flagship sonar operator screams a warning. It is too late. The first torpedo slams into the flagship's starboard side, directly below the waterline. The warhead detonates. The explosion creates a massive gas bubble. It expands violently, lifting the 20,000-ton ship out of the water. The steel hull screams as it bends. Gravity takes over. The ship crashes back down. The keel snaps with the sound of a thunderclap. The second torpedo strikes the stern. It vaporizes the propellers and rudder. The engineering section disintegrates. Inside the ship, walls of water smash through bulkheads. Sailors are swept away in the torrent. Lights flicker and die. Fires erupt where electrical lines short out against the flooding seawater. The noise is deafening, screeching metal and rushing water. The ship breaks in two. The bow tilts vertically, pointing at the sky. Cargo crates and parked helicopters slide off the deck, crashing into the ocean. Nearby, a third torpedo hunts a supply ship. It impacts the fuel hold. A fireball erupts from the water, lighting up the night sky for miles. The supply ship simply ceases to exist, turned into a cloud of burning debris. The US submarine captain orders a hard dive. The sub angles down, disappearing into the thermal layers to escape retaliation. Above, the ocean swallows the broken flagship. A massive vortex swirls where the command ship once was. The enemy fleet is headless. Panic takes over the radio waves. 0600 hours, the Straits. Dawn breaks cold and gray. Mist drifts over the water, smelling of oil and charred debris. The sea is calm again, but the surface is scarred. Wreckage bobbles in the swells. The enemy fleet is broken. The remaining ships are turning, bows pointing away from the island chain. They are limping home, trailing smoke. On the flight deck of the US carrier, the mood is grim but focused. The sun cuts through the clouds. A flight of Super Hornets launches. They do not carry heavy ordnance this time. They carry air-to-air missiles. Their mission is containment. They roar overhead, securing the airspace. Below them, the scene is absolute. The enemy flagship is gone. The blockade is dissolved. Allied merchant ships begin to move again, navigating carefully through the debris field. On the beachhead, the Marines stand up. They are dirty, exhausted, covered in sand and grease. They check their weapons. They drink water from plastic canteens. The enemy infantry has surrendered or fled into the deep jungle. Medics move among the wounded, loading stretchers onto transport helicopters. The rotors chop the air, lifting the casualties toward the hospital ships offshore. The US Admiral stands on the bridge of the carrier. He watches the retreating enemy radar signatures fade. He picks up the secure phone. He confirms the objective is met. The shipping lanes are open. The partner nation is secure. The action is over. The silence returns to the ocean heavier than before.